Shalom, my name is Yair Davidiy. I'm speaking to you from the land of Israel, from an area that has been liberated from heathen oppressors, from what is known in newspaper parlance as over the green line. And now we are about to discuss the subject concerning lost and tribes. Lost and tribes are that section of the Israelite nation who got lost consciousness of their ancestry. They constituted the majority of the Israelite tribes. There were 12 tribes of Israel. They divided into two different sections. The northern section consisted of 10 tribes. They were conquered by the Assyrians and taken into exile, and they lost consciousness of their ancestry, but according to prophecy they will return. And much of prophecy concerns the lost tribes, at least a good portion of it. And lost tribes are important, and they will return, and they will play a vital role in the end times. And we are now nearing the end times, and we have identified the lost tribes as Western peoples, especially the English-speaking peoples. And the English-speaking peoples are dominated by the tribes of Joseph. Joseph was two tribes, Ephraim and Manasseh. We have proven that the lost 10 tribes are dominant amongst English-speaking peoples, especially the tribes of Joseph. And Isaiah in verse 2:6, chapter 2, verse 6, in some versions it's given as verse 5, at all events Isaiah indicates that the lost 10 tribes have to return, they have to repent of their sins in the end times. They will be guilty of many things, and amongst the other things they will be guilty of not having recognized who they were. They would not have recognized their ancestry, and they would have not been conscious or significantly appreciative that they were brothers to the Jewish people, to the tribe of Judah. And you may ask, why should they have been, or how could they have been? They didn't know about it. That was the whole thing about them. They lost consciousness of who they were. Perhaps, but there is evidence around. We in our work, we bring evidence, we bring proofs, and we try and attract attention to it. We try and arouse interest in it, and it is important, and we have evidence that is conclusive, or is at least very, very strong. It should be considered worth examination, and it is potentially important. And we find people are appreciative of it. People do respond, but the response is not overwhelming, to say the least. And compared to other things, it is almost non-existent. It is something. We have to be grateful for what there is. And apparently this is how divine providence wants it. But nevertheless, there should be a greater interest in this matter, and people should be more appreciative of what we do, and the people also should be considered a challenge, so you don't necessarily agree. You're not certain that whether or not we are saying the truth, or whether we are correct in what we claim, but there's something there, so check into it. Check out other sources, read what we do say, understand what we do say, appreciate it, evaluate it, take it into consideration at the very least. And it seems that Isaiah is also making a similar challenge to you. So this is what Isaiah is saying. The prophet Isaiah, he lived at the time when the lost 10 tribes were exiled. He was a member of the royal house. He was related to the king of Judah. He was a descendant of King David. And he knew what was going on, and he lived during the period when the lost 10 tribes were being exiled, and he prophesied concerning them and also concerning Judah. So we have here Isaiah chapter 2. Isaiah chapter 2, he says, "Come, house of Jacob, and let us walk in the light of the Lord, for you have abandoned your people, the house of Jacob, because they are filled with influences from the east, and they are soothsayers like the Philistines. They strike bargains with the children of foreigners. The land also has been filled with silver and gold. They are into material prosperity, into acquiring wealth and enjoying it, the good things of life. There's no end to their treasures. The land also has been filled with horses, And there's no end to their chariots. So Isaiah is depicting things in the terminology of his times, things that he understood. But related to our times, and chariots are the same as cars, and the land is filled with cars, and this is a good description of what we have now. It also says that the land has also been filled with idols that worship the work of their hands, which their fingers have made. They worship, they are proud of their own achievements, they worship it, they attribute great significance to it. The common man has been humbled, the man of importance has been abased, and do not forgive them. So that is what Isaiah chapter 2 is saying, and he goes on, and he is describing a situation similar to what we have in our times. He's describing a general contentment with what they have, with material achievements, and he compares it to idolatry. And this is the end time situation. But he also says what he did say in verse 6, Isaiah 2 verse 6, "For you have abandoned your people, you have abandoned your people, the house of Jacob." So this is been translated, at least the translation that we used, what they say, "For you have abandoned your people, the house of Jacob," is referring to God. They put you in a capital Y. As if the prophet is addressing God, and saying that God has abandoned the house of Jacob because they have gone in the ways of the pagans and because they have sinned. So that is one possibility as to how the verse may be understood. And the word rabbinical commentators, very important rabbinical commentators such as the Radak and Rashi and others who so understood the verse. But an alternative understandings exist, and in the Bible, in biblical exegesis, as distinct from biblical halakha, from the rulings of law, but in understanding biblical message, it happens that more than one meaning may be read into the verse, and more than one meaning is actually implied. So our alternate understanding is not necessarily contradicting another one, but both understandings may be applicable depending upon the context and the situation. At all events, we also have others, such as Ibn Ezra, Nabil Nagayon, and also in the modern one, Amos Haham and Dart Mikra, who understand it differently, who understand it as we understood it. For instance, Dart Mikra says, understands the verse, the expression to be saying, "You, O house of Jacob, have abandoned, deserted, left your own people, and gone to other peoples to learn from them how to live and worship idols." In other words, the house of Jacob has left his own people and gone to foreigners and is learning from foreigners. That is how Dart Mikra understands the verse to be saying. And if we add another element to this understanding, who is the house of Jacob? The house of Jacob in the Bible refers to the lost 10 tribes of Israel. House of Jacob means the lost 10 tribes of Israel. Frequently in the Bible we have Judah and Israel together in the same verse, whereas Israel represents the 10 tribes, juxtaposed with Judah represents Judah, the Jewish people, and Israel represents the 10 tribes of Israel. So too we often have the house of Jacob, meaning or referring to the 10 tribes of Israel. We have a verse, Isaiah 2:5 says, "O house of Jacob, let us walk in the light of the Lord." And here Jacob stands for Israel. And we also have we find the name Jacob used by the 10 tribes. The American peoples often are known as Yank. Yank is a nickname for Americans. Within the USA, Yank means someone from the north. Whereas the south, they do not like having the name applied to them, but in the eyes of foreigners, Yank means American. And Yank is short in Hebrew and also in Yiddish. Yankov is short for Jacob. It's another way of pronouncing Jacob. It is the same as Jake, which is short for Jacob. In other words, they are called Jacob. They are called a nickname meaning Jacob. Also in Scotland we have Jock. Jock for a Scottish person means Jacob. And so too the British flag is known as Union Jack. Jack is short for Jacob. The unification of Jacob is what the British flag is known as, and this represents Britain and the offshoots of Britain. So here we have the name in contemporary reality, Jack or Jacob, representing the tribes, English-speaking peoples. And this is how the Bible says that Jacob represents the 10 tribes, especially Joseph. As we find here, we have in 49:6, Isaiah 49:6 says, and he said, it's the right thing that you should be my servant to raise up the tribes of Jacob referring to the 10 tribes. To restore the preserved of Israel, I will also give you a light for the Gentiles, that you may be my salvation unto the ends of the earth. We find the lost 10 tribes people we identify as descend from lost tribes to a significant degree at the ends of the earth. We find them in the British Isles, we find them in northwest Europe and Western Europe, also North America, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, all those areas at the geographical extremities of the continental masses. They are literally at the ends of the earth, as we have explained at length in another talk. And we have other proofs identifying these peoples with the lost 10 tribes of Israel. And so too, we have this verse, we have this expression in Isaiah 2:6, we have rejected your people, the house of Jacob, and so on. And also, we should remember that Jacob is another name for Israel. In Genesis 32:28 it says, and he said, your name shall be called no more Jacob, but Israel. For as a prince have you power with God, and with men have prevailed. Also Genesis 35:10. God said unto him, your name is Jacob, your name shall not be called any more Jacob, but Israel shall be your name, and he called his name Israel. We have this Hebrew work. It's called Sefer Shiftei Israel, the Book of the Tribes of Israel, by Fishel Ma'al, or Fishel Ma'al. He's actually a native of the USA. He's a rabbi and also a practicing psychologist. We have spoken to him on the phone. He has given us permission to quote from his book. And this is a very good book. Describes the characteristics of the different tribes and so on. And in this work, he quotes from another work from a Sokochava Ravi, who was a head of a Hasidic dynasty, and from other sources, and he has much to say concerning the characteristics of Joseph, characteristics of all the tribes of Israel, and he's also something to say on a subject in which Joseph is identified with Jacob. And we read out in very rough translation what has been said. He says, these are the generations of Jacob. Joseph, Genesis 37:2. We have the expression Genesis 37:2 begins, these are the generations of Jacob. Joseph follows on in this expression, especially in Hebrew. The generations of Jacob are Joseph. Joseph is linked to Jacob. And he quotes the outcome of the quality of Jacob of gathering together divergent forces found in Joseph. Also the name Joseph can mean gathering together. It has from a word root connoting that. He says that Joseph was the closest to his father Jacob. Jacob was looked like Joseph, or rather Joseph looked more like his father than the other tribes. It looked similar to him. He had a similar cast of countenance. And also the precious stone of Joseph on the breastplate of the high priest had written on it the names of the tribes of Jacob, as we shall explain, the 12 tribes. So what you had this had a breastplate. A breastplate was a kind of a linen garment, or a square piece of linen. And the square piece of linen had encased in it precious stones in rows of 3. 1, 2, 3, 4 rows. And these, and in each row, you had the precious stones, 3 stones in each row. The rows were encased in gold and inlaid on this garment, linen garment. Linen garment was attached to the high priest, to an overall, a coloured overall, which the high priest put on him. Linen garment was attached to him by a blue ribbon that tied onto his belt down below, and also on the shoulders. they had a kind of clasps, gold clasps that held the breastplate to the ephod, to the overall garment of the high priest. And these clasps consisted of shoham stones. Shohan is translated as onyx or sardonyx. This is a black, bluish, or sometimes bluish black, sometimes green black, sometimes purplish black, but a black looking stone. Another stone may have been intended, but this is how it is conventionally understood to have been. This onyx stone was on the shoulders, and on each stone were the names engraved, the names of 6 tribes. 6 tribes on this side and 6 tribes on that side, altogether 12 tribes of Israel, engraved on the shoham, on the 2 shoham stones on the shoulders. And also on the breastplate for Joseph there was a shoham stone. So, rabbinical explanations say that this shows us that Joseph united in himself all of the tribes, that Joseph had the ability to gather together to unify all of the tribes within him. And Joseph, as if to say, bears the 12 tribes within himself. And so we have, if you're interested in the sources, look up Exodus 39, verses 6 to 7, also verse 13 to 14. And we should note that Yair says, writing the names of the 12 tribes on the shoham stone, his stone of Joseph was significant of the task of Joseph. This was to fulfill the aim of his father Jacob, and to bring together all the forces of people into one body encompassing all Israel. And so we have this, and we have other rabbinical works that expound on this theme and continue the message, and there are possibly much more, because these are works that we have come across, and we don't try as hard as we could or as hard as we should, because we have other things to do, other things to study. And these are just works that we incidentally came across that confirm this conclusion. But if someone went into it very deeply and much more extensively, they could possibly find much, much more on this subject. At all events, we have the Safas Emet. It was a famous commentary on the Bible, a very important commentary, and he also says, talks on this subject in Exodus 28:12. He says the shoham with 2 shoulder-piece stones on which the names of the 12 tribes were engraved. And he says the main point of this concerns Joseph, and that is why on the ephod shoulder-piece of the high priest there was only the shoham. There's only type of stones used was a shoham stone on the shoulders. And this is the stone of Joseph, and by the means of the stone of Joseph all of the tribes were united at their roots. And that Joseph has the power through which all the 12 tribes may be unified, and each find their unique expression in this unity. And so too, he says concerning Judah, he says he also speaks, the Safas Emet also speaks concerning the relationship between Judah, in a spiritual sense, between Judah and between Joseph. And when Judah pleaded with Joseph to release Benjamin when they had the encounter in Egypt, he said, "Be an Adoni," translated as "please my Lord," but actually in Hebrew it may be understood to say, "In me, my Lord." That is referring to Joseph. He was telling him that through Judah, through relating to Judah, or through the ability and the work of Judah, does Joseph realize his lordship and his power. That is what is being said, and that is how the Hebrew may be understood. And the Safas Emet speaks on this subject, and he also relates Joseph to Jacob. Back to what we were speaking about, Isaiah 2, verse 6, and the first part of the verse, "You have abandoned your people, the house of Jacob," may be read as saying, "You, O house of Jacob, have abandoned your people." You have refused to acknowledge your own Israelite origin. That's what it means to abandon your people. It doesn't mean abandon your people. You have abandoned who you are. And you've also rejected or not been sufficiently appreciative of Judah, who is your brother. And since you are an Israelite people, Judah is an Israelite nation, and both Judah and Joseph represent the two halves of the Israelite nation, and they must come together. And Joseph has not been aware of this, has not made himself aware of this, has not been appreciated of it. And when the evidence was given unto him, presented to him, he rejected it, or he did not, he ignored it, one could say. As today we find our evidence and our proofs that we try and bring to the attention of others to be rejected and ignored. And the Almighty is challenging you and challenging all of us to take this more seriously. And our efforts in this regard, they should be appreciated, they should be supported, because without the support of others, we cannot function, and this is how divine providence wants it to be. It is, or it should be a unified effort of all of us. Everyone should do what they should, or what they can. So may the Lord God of Israel bless and guide all of us.